There is a hidden chamber within you, richer than all the treasuries of kings. In that secret place, gold and silver are but shadows compared to the wealth of your own being. Tonight, I will show you the simple act by which you step into that chamber, claim its abundance, and walk this earth as the rich man you already are. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. These are not the words of a man trying to convince you to be worthy of some distant reward. They are the unalterable declaration of your own being. The Father is not a person outside you. It is the eternal presence within you that declares, I am. It is the source, the life, the awareness that says of itself, before Abraham was I am, and the kingdom, this treasure house of all that is good, beautiful, and abundant, is not an estate waiting to be built. It is already finished, already given. If it is the Father's good pleasure to give, then giving is not a possibility, it is a fact, an already accomplished act. You are not here to earn it. You are here to awaken to it. The tragedy is not that men are denied the kingdom, but that they refuse to enter it. They look for it in distant times, in favorable conditions, in the approval of others, and never find it because they overlook the truth that the kingdom is within. When you read that, the silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts, you must understand that the Lord is your own consciousness, the very sense of being that animates you now. Silver and gold are symbols of value, sufficiency, and supply. To say that the Lord possesses them is to say that your own consciousness contains the reality of every form of abundance. This is not a poetic idea, it is a law of being. If you close your eyes for a moment and strip away every possession, every relationship, every circumstance, what remains? You still remain. There is an awareness that cannot be taken from you. That awareness, that pure I am, is the true owner of all. And because it owns all in the unseen, it can call forth any form it desires in the seen. It is the potter, and the outer world is the clay. The clay has no life or shape of its own. It simply takes the form impressed upon it. If the form impressed is one of wealth, the clay must become wealth in your experience. Consider the words of the psalmist. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. The fullness means everything contained in it, lands, seas, harvests, treasures, opportunities. If the earth and its fullness belong to the Lord, and the Lord is the I am within you, then nothing is outside your ownership in consciousness. But here is the mystery: ownership in consciousness is the only ownership there is. Outer possession without inner ownership is an illusion that quickly fades. There are men who have fortunes yet live in the constant fear of losing them, and there are others with empty purses who walk with the quiet dignity of kings because they possess the state of wealth in their minds. You may have heard of a man who inherited a great sum unexpectedly. Before the letter reached him with the news, before the bankers called to confirm, something had already changed within him. For years, without telling anyone, he had gone to bed imagining himself writing generous checks, funding the dreams of others, and living with a freedom that comes only when money is abundant. Though in the outer, he still worked at a modest post, his inner life was that of a benefactor and a man of leisure. The moment the inheritance was made known, he realized it had already been his in consciousness. The news was merely the shadow following the light. This is why Scripture says, "Believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." The believing is the receiving. You may say, "But I see no evidence." Evidence is the final scene of a play, and belief is the rehearsal in the hidden theater of the mind. You do not rehearse in vain. Every assumption repeated becomes the script your world enacts. If your rehearsals are of lack, the scene will be of lack. If they are of wealth, the scene will be of wealth. To truly accept that it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom is to drop all struggle for worthiness. The gift is already in your hand. The only act required is to open your eyes to see it. Imagine a child in a garden filled with fruit trees, unaware that every tree belongs to him. He might beg for an apple, plead for someone to share a pear, or cry in hunger, not because the garden is lacking, but because his mind is asleep to its ownership. The moment he knows, begging ceases. He picks and eats with ease. Such is your relationship to the wealth of life. The garden is consciousness, and the fruits are all the forms your heart desires. Do not mistake this for wishful thinking. A wish is a hope deferred to the future. The kingdom is not in the future, it is now. When you read that no is the accepted time, it means the only time in which you can receive is this present moment. You cannot receive in some tomorrow that never comes. You can only awaken now to the reality that all is already yours. In that awakening, the outer will shape itself to mirror the inner. When I speak of the Father, remember I speak of your own invisible self. It is the self you meet in moments of stillness, the self that was before you wore this body, and will be when this body is gone. That self has no concept of poverty, for it is the life of the universe. It does not work to acquire, it simply is. And because it is, it expresses. Wealth in this light is nothing more than the natural expression of the abundance you already are. Think of the sea. Does the sea strive to be full? Does it struggle to keep its waters? It simply is the sea, and fullness is its nature. So it is with you. If you dwell in the awareness that I am wealth, you will express wealth as effortlessly as the sea holds its waves. If you instead dwell in I am poor, then poverty, too, will be expressed without effort. The state chosen determines the expression. I once spoke with a man who told me, I have worked all my life and yet have nothing to show for it. As he spoke, I could hear in his every phrase the confession of one who believed he was always striving toward a distant goal but never arriving. I asked him if, for just a week, he would go to bed each night and rise each morning with the quiet statement, I am in possession of all I desire. Not hoping to be, not working toward it, but already in possession. He agreed. 2 weeks later, without seeking it, he was offered a position that doubled his income and came with the freedom to travel, something he had longed for silently. The position had been there, in the realm of the unseen, waiting for his assumption to call it forth. You see, wealth is not a matter of gathering, but of being. When the prodigal son came to himself, he remembered that in his father's house there was bread enough and to spare. He had been in rags feeding swine, yet in that moment of remembrance, of inner identification, the outer journey back to the house began. That house is your awareness of the kingdom. The journey is your acceptance of your place within it. If you can take this one truth, that it is the good pleasure of your own indwelling Father to give you the kingdom, and make it your living conviction, you will cease to look to others, to conditions, or to luck as the source of your wealth. You will know that the source is within, and the channel through which it flows can be any form the outer world provides. You will not limit yourself by saying, it must come from here, or it must be done this way. The kingdom is infinite in its forms, and the path of supply is as varied as the stars. The giving is already done. You are not waiting for the Father to make up his mind. The decision is eternal, and it is this, all that I have is thine. If this truth seems distant, it is only because you have clothed yourself in a false identity, one who is separate, needy, incomplete. But that garment can be removed in an instant. Strip it away in consciousness and clothe yourself in the awareness that you are the hair of all that is. Not will be, are. And when you begin to live from that awareness, you will notice subtle shifts. The way you speak will change. The way you carry yourself will change. You will expect good without anxiety, and in that expectation, you will invite it. The world responds to the tone of your being, and if that tone is one of possession, the echo will be possession made visible. It is not arrogance to walk as one who owns the world when you know that ownership is in consciousness. It is the humility of recognizing the truth. The truly wealthy in spirit do not boast, for they know their supply is not in competition with another's. They can rejoice in another's gain as in their own, for all springs from the same infinite source. If, therefore, you have thought of wealth as something to be earned through ceaseless struggle, pause and consider, can you earn what is already given? Can you buy what already belongs to you? No, you can only receive it by awakening to it. And the moment you do, the outer must conform, for it is powerless to do otherwise. When you understand this, you will cease asking, how will it come? And instead dwell in the certainty, it is mine now. And in that dwelling, the invisible cause is set in motion, and the visible effect will appear as surely as the dawn follows the night. The law by which all things are created is simple, yet so profound that most pass their entire lives without comprehending it. It is the law of assumption, the law that declares what you assume as true in consciousness becomes fact in your world. You may labor, you may strive, you may try to manipulate circumstances, but until your inner state aligns with the reality you desire, the outer remains unchanged. The outer is but a reflection of the inner. Wealth is no exception to this principle. You cannot change the numbers in your bank account until you have first changed the consciousness that governs those numbers. You cannot receive the riches of life until you have assumed the state of one who already possesses them. Many people suppose that they must earn, accumulate, or labor to create wealth. They believe that outer action precedes inner realization. Yet the truth is entirely reversed. The inner state precedes the fact. The moment you occupy the consciousness of one who is wealthy, you have called the wealth into being, even if the evidence has yet to appear. Consider the words of the masters, according to your faith be it unto you. Faith is not hope, faith is a knowing, a certainty that what you desire is already yours. When you act from this state, the world bends to accommodate the assumption. Imagine, if you will, a man who desires to own a prosperous business. He has no capital, no experience, and no outward evidence to suggest success. Yet each night, before sleep, he closes his eyes and enters into the world as though the enterprise already exists. He walks its halls in imagination, shakes hands with satisfied clients, signs contracts with confidence, and feels the weight of accomplishment in his hands. By day, he continues his ordinary work, appearing as any other man, yet within he lives in the state of the fulfilled wish. Time passes, and through a series of coincidences, opportunities, and helpful interventions, the business comes into the world exactly as he has assumed it. The cause always precedes the effect. His assumption was the unseen seed, and the effect is the visible fruit. The law is impartial. It does not care whether the assumption is of wealth or poverty, success or failure. The outer world cannot distinguish between what is true and what is imagined with feeling. Your consciousness is the crucible of creation, and what you impress upon it is what manifests. The challenge, then, is not to labor in the outer, but to discipline the inner life. It is to live in the state of already having, of already being, until that state becomes fact in your world. There are countless illustrations of this law at work in everyday life, though few recognize it. A woman may assume scarcity because of a lack of money in her purse. She worries, she plans, she frets, believing that her lack is the ultimate reality. Yet every outward manifestation she experiences, late bills, overdue notices, small misfortunes, are merely the echo of her inner assumption. Conversely, another woman may assume that her needs are always met. She feels grateful, she feels secure, she feels as though abundance flows to her effortlessly, and without her conscious effort to chase it, money arrives through unexpected channels, gifts, opportunities, and timely interventions. The difference is not in external effort, but in the inner state of consciousness. It is vital to recognize that the assumption must be sustained. A fleeting thought or a passing wish has no power. The law of assumption operates in the continuity of consciousness. To say, I am wealthy, and then allow doubt to enter, is to sow confusion in the mind and delay manifestation. But when you persist in the assumption, when you guard it and nurture it as you would a tender plant, it grows into the visible form. You must see yourself as the possessor, not merely the seeker. The outer world cannot bring to you that which you do not already contain inwardly. Even the scriptures bear witness to this truth. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Ask with what? The lips of the body have no power. It is the asking of the imagination, the assuming of the mind, that makes the petition real. Seek with the knowing of already having. Knock with the consciousness that the door is already open. In every instance, the outer must yield to the inner. There is no other order. Consider the example of a man who sought a promotion in his place of employment. He was diligent, he was competent, yet his efforts yielded no advancement. One day, he resolved to occupy the state of a man already promoted. In his quiet moments, he pictured himself receiving congratulations from his colleagues, signing his new title, feeling the satisfaction of recognition. He spoke as one who had already achieved it. Days passed, and he continued to live in this state, undisturbed by appearances. A week later, the opportunity he had imagined arrived exactly as he had foreseen it. The company created the position, and he stepped into it. His assumption had preceded the fact, and the fact could not resist the power of his inner conviction. You may object, saying that life circumstances are harsh, that debt, sickness, or lack seem overwhelming. Yet all outer conditions are merely reflections of the inner state. Change the state, and the outer must follow. The persistent assumption of wealth does not ignore reality, it transforms it. Like a seed planted in fertile soil, the imagined state of abundance grows unseen until it breaks through into the material world. It is never too late to begin. No matter the apparent circumstances, the law of assumption is available. It is impartial, timeless, and exacting. To dwell in the assumption is to recognize that wealth is not a distant acquisition, but an identity. You are not striving for riches, you are becoming the rich man. This shift in consciousness is the only true key. Money, possessions, titles, opportunities, all are merely reflections of the consciousness that first imagined them. You may see the rich man and envy his outward accumulation, yet until you occupy the state of that man in your imagination, you remain outside the experience. The assumption is the bridge, and only by crossing it inwardly do you find the outer manifestation. It is also essential to combine assumption with feeling. Thought alone is inert. It is the vivid, sensuous imagining coupled with the emotional certainty of possession that moves the unseen into visibility. Close your eyes and feel the crispness of banknotes in your hand. Hear the sound of a contract signed or the grateful voice of a client expressing thanks. Sense the comfort, the ease, the freedom that comes from abundance. Persist in this inner drama until it becomes natural, until it occupies every corner of your consciousness. This is no act of vanity, it is the law at work. Many fail to recognize the power of imagination because they confuse it with fantasy. Fantasy is idle, imagination is the active principle of creation. To imagine with faith and feeling is to command the unseen, to decree in the inner world what shall appear in the outer. The law of assumption does not entertain weakness or doubt. It honors only the sustained, concentrated state of knowing. The universe bows to the consciousness that dares to occupy a state before it is apparent. Think of a young man who longed for financial freedom. He had no money, no connections, and no experience in business. Each night, he lay in bed and imagined himself living a life of abundance. He visualized receiving dividends, paying off debts, giving gifts, and enjoying the pleasures of a prosperous life. By morning, he carried a quiet confidence into the world. Within months, opportunities appeared that seemed coincidental, but were in truth a direct consequence of his inner assumption. By the end of the year, he had created the very life he had nightly imagined. The outer could not resist the inner reality he had assumed. There is an elegance in this principle. It does not require struggle, coercion, or manipulation. It requires clarity, persistence, and the courage to assume the state that delights you. The law of assumption is not complicated, it is simple and exact. Its power is complete. Your thoughts, feelings, and assumptions are the instrument of creation, and wealth is but one of the many forms that flow from this instrument. Even in moments of seeming failure, the law is unbroken. A man may encounter setbacks, delays, or obstacles, yet these are but the echoes of former assumptions. By correcting the inner state, by resuming the assumption of already possessing, the tide of outer events shifts. It is a matter of timing and persistence, not chance. You may find the door locked, but the key resides in consciousness. Insert it, turn it, and the door opens. You must also learn to act in the world from the state you assume. The man who imagines wealth, but behaves with timidity or hesitation, sends mixed messages to the universe. The inner must guide the outer. The posture, the words, the demeanor, all must reflect the state of abundance. When inner and outer are aligned, the world bends effortlessly to accommodate the assumption. In every scriptural example, the same law is affirmed. Abraham believed, and it was counted unto him as righteousness. Moses parted the waters, not by labor alone, but by acting in faith upon the assumption that God was with him. David faced Goliath not by might, but by the certainty within that he was equipped to prevail. The principle is unchanging. The unseen, assumed and felt, commands the visible world. Consider your own life. Have there not been moments when you anticipated an event, a meeting, a gift, or a success, and it occurred exactly as you imagined? That is proof enough of the law at work. Extend that same certainty to wealth. Assume the state, feel it fully, and the world cannot resist. It is the natural order, as sure as sunrise follows night, as inevitable as the tides obey the moon. The law is exact, and it responds not to wish, but to assumption. You must dwell in the state of already being the possessor. Your consciousness must be saturated with the reality of wealth, and you must persist despite appearances. Outer evidence is irrelevant. If you find the purse empty, the accounts lacking, the circumstances delayed, that is but the echo of previous beliefs. Persist in the inner state, and the outer must conform. The universe is impartial, exact, and obedient to consciousness. You may wish to test it, to measure its efficacy by rapid results. But the law is eternal, not hasty. Patience is simply the outer recognition of inner persistence. Continue to assume, continue to feel, continue to live in the state of wealth, and the results will manifest with perfect timing. There is no need to force, no need to struggle. The outer always follows the inner, and the inner has already determined the outcome. Even the smallest assumption can grow into vast outer realities if held faithfully. A simple declaration repeated night after night becomes the seed from which forests of abundance spring. You are the sower imagination, faith, and feeling are your tools. The outer world waits only for your assumption to make it visible. Remember, the law of assumption does not require elaborate rituals or external validation. It demands only the inner conviction, the feeling, and the persistence of assumption. It is the simplest, yet most powerful principle known to man. It is the principle by which all that exists has come into being. You do not create by chance, by effort, or by struggle. You create by assuming, by dwelling in the state of the fulfilled desire, and by persisting in that state until the outer must conform. The moment you fully grasp that your consciousness is the cause and the outer world the effect, everything changes. Wealth ceases to be a distant goal, a hoped-for reward, or a borrowed concept. It becomes an immediate reality. You are no longer a seeker, you are the possessor. You are no longer hoping, you are knowing. You are no longer laboring to acquire, you are living as one who has always possessed. The outer circumstances may appear slow, and the world may tempt you to doubt, but the law is unfailing. As the farmer sows the seed in winter, knowing the harvest will come in its season, so must you sow the assumption, knowing the manifestation will appear. Doubt is the only thing that can hinder. Perseverance in the inner state guarantees the outcome. You do not need to struggle, you only need to assume. Every great figure, every master of life has known this law. They have not labored against the world, they have labored within themselves. They have known that the kingdom, the treasure, the abundance is already theirs. They have assumed, they have persisted, and the outer world has obeyed. Wealth is not a distant mountain to climb, it is the very atmosphere of consciousness. Enter it, breathe it, live it, and the outer forms will respond naturally and inevitably. Close your eyes for a moment, and let us journey together into the theater of your imagination, the inner world where all creation begins. It is here, in the unseen, that the seeds of wealth and abundance are first sown. To imagine is not to indulge in idle dreams, nor is it to speculate on what might be. To imagine with feeling is to bring forth the unseen into the world. Wealth is no exception to this law. You cannot become a rich person merely by hoping for riches or by observing them in the lives of others. You must enter, fully and vividly, the state of being that such a life implies. Imagine yourself now, not in a distant future, but in a present that is already fulfilled. Picture a morning in your home where the sun pours through windows onto furnishings of comfort and taste. Feel the texture of the objects around you, the smoothness of a polished desk, the weight of a pen you hold in your hand. Hear the gentle rustle of pages as you review letters of opportunity that have arrived to affirm your prosperity. Notice the soft, confident tone of your own voice as you converse with a friend or colleague about endeavors that yield more than enough. In every detail, sense the richness of life, not as an observer, but as one who lives within it, as a man who has always had abundance. The law of imagination is not mere visualization, it is the art of embodying the end. The Bible says, according to your faith be it unto you. Faith is not a passive hope, it is the vivid act of assuming the state of already possessing. When you see yourself living in wealth, you do not see it as a possibility, you see it as reality. The moment you enter that state, your consciousness issues a command to the unseen, and the unseen is bound to respond. In imagination, you are already the rich person you desire to be. By dwelling in that scene, by feeling its textures, its sounds, its joys, you impress upon your being the unmistakable signature of wealth. Consider a young woman who wished for financial freedom. She had debts, she had responsibilities, and she had no immediate means of escape from lack. Yet each night she retired to her room and closed her eyes to enter a world where her bills were paid, her work was appreciated, and money flowed to her in ways she had not yet imagined. She did not worry about the outer world, nor did she analyze the how or when. She simply entered the state of her desire fulfilled. Weeks passed, and opportunities began to present themselves. A freelance assignment that paid generously, a small inheritance from a relative, a client who insisted upon rewarding her work above the agreed price. The outer world simply conformed to the inner reality she had assumed. This is the mystery and the miracle of imagination. It creates the cause, and the world provides the effect. You may say, I have no means, I have no resources, I have nothing to manifest wealth. Yet in the unseen, all means exist. All resources are yours the moment you occupy the state of the possessor. A man without a cent in his pocket can, through imagination, live as one of freedom and abundance. He can feel the crispness of bills, the ease of managing affairs, the joy of giving and receiving. When he leaves his imaginative state and walks into the world, he carries the magnet of that inner reality, and the outer cannot resist. To be rich in imagination is to be rich in consciousness. Let me illustrate. There was a man who, for years, had desired to own a home of his own. Each morning he awoke to the sight of rented rooms, the walls cold and impersonal. One evening, weary of waiting for the outer to respond, he lay in bed and entered fully into the reality he sought. He saw himself opening the door to his new home, smelling the polished floors, listening to the laughter of friends invited to celebrate with him. He felt the comfort, the security, the pride of ownership. He lingered in this scene night after night. Within months, he found the perfect opportunity. A home he had never considered affordable became available under conditions that mirrored exactly what he had imagined. The unseen had been impressed, and the outer had no choice but to yield. The imagination must be felt. Thought alone, intellectual understanding, will not command the unseen. You must enter the scene with all your senses. Hear, see, touch, smell, and taste the reality of the state. If you desire wealth, do not imagine the bank account number or the accumulation of coin as a mere abstraction. Feel the sense of freedom that wealth brings. Hear the acknowledgement of others, sense the security, the comfort, the opportunities that unfold naturally when you are rich. Let these sensations saturate your being. It is the feeling of having, the immersion in the state, that makes the imagination powerful. Many attempt to imagine, yet their scenes are fragmented, their belief wavering. They say, I imagine wealth, yet the feeling is mixed with doubt, with fear, with hesitation. In such cases, the imagination becomes ineffective, for the unseen responds only to a coherent and sustained state. The law is exact, it will not deliver half-hearted petitions. You must inhabit the state fully, unreservedly, as though it were your only reality. By doing so, you create an inner world so complete that the outer world must conform. Let me tell you of another instance. A merchant desired to expand his trade, but found every route blocked, every opportunity delayed. He had exhausted every practical effort and had nearly given up. One night in his room, he imagined himself walking through his newly established markets, hearing the calls of satisfied customers, seeing the flow of goods, feeling the satisfaction of a profitable and thriving business. He allowed himself to be fully immersed in this scene, experiencing it as if it were real. Within a matter of weeks, contacts appeared, opportunities arose, and barriers melted away. The outer world mirrored exactly what he had sustained in the imagination. You must understand that imagination is not separate from reality. It is the invisible reality that precedes the visible. The outer cannot exist without the inner first impressing it. Every law of nature, every principle of life operates this way. The seed must be planted before the tree can grow. The blueprint must exist before the building can be erected. The unseen must be impressed before the seen manifests. Wealth, therefore, begins in imagination, not in labor, not in analysis, not in negotiation, but in the vivid, felt experience of already having. Do not be deceived by appearances. The outer world is often slow to show the fulfillment of your inner work. A man may persist in imagining a prosperous life, yet the current circumstances may seem contrary. This is not failure, it is the natural delay of manifestation in the outer. Continue to dwell in the scene, continue to feel it, continue to live in the state, and the outer will eventually conform. The process is certain, it is law. The evidence of the world is not the measure of truth, the unseen state is. There is elegance in this method. You do not chase, you do not manipulate, you do not bargain with the outer world. You simply enter into your imagination as though it is already fulfilled, and by doing so, you impress the invisible with a pattern so definite that the visible must obey. Think of the river. It flows not by coercion, not by struggle, but because it is the nature of water to flow toward the ocean. So it is with your inner assumption. Once you have established the scene, the currents of outer events will flow in perfect accord with it. Even small details matter. The man who imagines wealth should not overlook the sensory components of his inner scene. He should see the notes in his hand, hear the exchange of business, feel the security, the joy, the comfort. He should imagine not only the end result, but the manner in which it is expressed, for the unseen responds to every detail impressed upon it. Imagination is the workshop of the soul. It constructs the outer world in perfect accord with its inner blueprint. There is also the question of time. Some imagine, yet doubt creeps in because they see no immediate result. Yet the unseen operates beyond the constraints of temporal measurement. Your persistent assumption, continued night after night, day after day, sets in motion effects that may appear in days, months, or years. But the timing is irrelevant, the law is unbroken. The moment you have fully assumed the scene, it exists eternally in consciousness. The outer world will conform when the conditions are right, and the conditions are created by your inner state. Consider the parable of the sower. The seed falls into various soils, some rocky, some fertile, some neglected. Yet the seed, given proper conditions, grows naturally and inevitably. Your imagination is the seed, the inner state is the soil. Fertilize it with persistence, water it with feeling, shelter it from doubt, and it will produce its harvest. The richness of life is the inevitable fruit of the imagination faithfully applied. Many men have complained that imagination is impractical, that it does not pay bills or put food on the table. But they fail to recognize that it is the very source of all practical means. The man who imagines abundance will naturally see opportunities, make correct decisions, attract helpful people, and create conditions that generate wealth. The imagination shapes perception, perception guides action, and action brings forth results. The three are united, but the first, imagination, is the source. Even in matters of giving, imagination is powerful. When you imagine yourself giving freely, you impress upon consciousness the state of having more than enough. The outer world responds by providing the means. Wealth flows to those who give in imagination, just as it flows to those who receive in imagination. The inner act of generosity precedes the outer. You do not give to attract, you give because the state of abundance exists within you. Let me recount a story. A man longed to contribute to his community, but had little in material wealth. One night, he imagined himself donating generously, seeing the joy his gift brought to others. He felt the satisfaction, the gratitude, and the pleasure of giving. In time, he found resources he had not considered. Forgotten savings, opportunities to earn, and unexpected gifts that allowed him to give exactly as he had imagined. The act of imagination had created the outer conditions to fulfill itself. You see, wealth is not simply coins and paper. It is the freedom to act, the joy of giving, the security of life, and the expression of one's true self. To imagine the rich life is to inhabit all these aspects fully. The outer world follows, obeying the patterns impressed in the invisible. Every great achievement, every masterful work, every success story is first written in the imagination before it is inscribed in reality. When you enter the scene of wealth in imagination, do not think small. The law does not limit itself to minor desires. It mirrors whatever state you inhabit, no matter the magnitude. Enter fully into the life you wish to live. See, hear, feel, taste, and experience it completely. Persist in this state, night after night, until the reality becomes an inseparable part of your consciousness. By doing so, you become the rich person in all that you do, and the outer world cannot resist reflecting it. Even challenges can be used within the imagination. If you face debts, obstacles, or lack, imagine yourself navigating them effortlessly, resolving them with ease, and moving forward in abundance. The unseen does not deny your power, it mirrors the state you inhabit. By consistently imagining solutions, freedom, and wealth, you create a world in which these realities appear naturally. The art of imagining wealth is, in truth, the art of becoming wealth. You do not chase it. You do not struggle against lack. You become the living expression of abundance. Your imagination, your persistent assumption, your vivid and sensuous entering into the state, all combine to shape the unseen into form. The more detailed, the more consistent, the more alive the imagination, the more certain the manifestation. Every night as you retire, you may enter this world freely. Let the outer day dissolve, and allow the imagination to take its place. Picture the wealth you desire, feel it fully, hear the sounds, see the colors, sense the textures, and rejoice in the state. Persist without concern for the outer evidence, for the unseen responds to feeling, not appearances. This is the pathway by which the rich life is called into being, the means by which the invisible commands the visible, and the method by which the ordinary man becomes the rich man through imagination alone. The unseen is ready to respond, and all that is required is for you to enter the state and dwell there with feeling and faith. It is not complicated, it is not distant, and it is not rare. It is the law of life itself, impartial and exact. The moment you imagine, the universe begins to mirror your state. Persist, feel, and inhabit the life of wealth as though it were already yours. In imagination, you are rich, and the outer world cannot resist. There is a principle that governs all reality, one so simple and so immutable that it escapes the notice of most men. It is the principle that the state precedes the fact. That which you inwardly feel and assume as true will inevitably find expression in your outward experience. You may labor, you may plan, you may argue with circumstance, yet nothing in the outer world can alter the state you occupy within. If you assume lack, poverty, and limitation, you will witness these forms faithfully in your life. If you assume abundance, freedom, and prosperity, you will see them materialize. The outer world is nothing but a mirror of your inner state, and the reflection is always exact. Consider a man who found himself in a series of misfortunes. Each morning, he rose to unpaid bills, unexpected debts, and delayed opportunities. Yet he was advised to do one simple thing: dwell each night in the state of wealth, of being already free from debt, of living with the comfort and security he desired. At first, it seemed a strange counsel. How could imagining freedom while surrounded by obstacles possibly create results? But he persisted. Each night he entered the scene in imagination. He felt the comfort of a paid account, the relief of abundance, the joy of financial independence. Slowly, subtly, he began to notice shifts. Notices arrived indicating debts had been forgiven, opportunities presented themselves that had seemed impossible, and small gifts and windfalls flowed into his life. The outer world was only responding to the state he had occupied in imagination. Scripture tells us, "The kingdom of God is within you." This is not a poetic metaphor, but an exact description of the mechanism by which all realities come to pass. The kingdom, the source of all power, all provision, and all wealth resides within your consciousness. It is your very awareness, your I am, that governs the world you experience. To dwell in the state of abundance is to enter the kingdom consciously. The outer manifestations, the money, the riches, the opportunities, are only the inevitable results of that inner dwelling. There is a parable that illustrates this principle. A man traveled through a desert seeking water. The sand stretched endlessly, the sun beat down, and he despaired of finding relief. Yet he was advised to imagine a spring before him, to see the cool waters, to feel the thirst quenched, to taste the refreshment. As he persisted in this inner vision, his steps became lighter, his direction clearer, and at last, miraculously, he came upon a spring he had not known existed. The spring was never outside him before. It existed first in the state he had assumed. So it is with wealth. The state of being rich, of living in abundance, must exist first inwardly before it can manifest outwardly. Many who seek money labor in outer activity, thinking that effort will compel provision. Yet they are mistaken. Outer effort without inner assumption is like pounding on a locked door with no key. The door will not open because the inner key has not been used. The key is your state. Occupy the state of wealth, of freedom, of satisfaction, and the door opens naturally. The outer labor may then appear as action, but it is not the source of creation. The source is the inner state. Consider the story of a young woman who desired a flourishing business. She had no clientele, no connections, and no capital. Each day she observed the empty streets, the absence of opportunity, and the lack of outward evidence of success. Yet each night she imagined the life she wished to inhabit. She saw her business thriving, felt the joy of satisfied customers, sensed the freedom of operating without worry, and rejoiced in her inner abundance. Weeks passed and doors began to open. A client appeared unexpectedly, a small loan was approved, and the flow of opportunity began. The outer world had conformed to the state she had occupied inwardly. The fact of her business was simply the mirror of the inner reality she had assumed. The state precedes the fact in every area of life. Health, relationships, career, and wealth are all governed by the same immutable law. The world cannot give to you that which you have not already taken inwardly. The outer world can only mirror what is first impressed upon consciousness. This is why so many men struggle, laboring for years, hoping, praying, and working endlessly, yet never achieving the success they desire. They occupy a state of lack, fear, and limitation, and the outer cannot contradict the inner. The world always conforms to consciousness, never the reverse. It is therefore essential to master your inner state. You cannot hope to control outer circumstances until you have first established dominion within. To do this, you must live in the end, not in the process. You must act as if the fact has already occurred and allow all your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to be consistent with that assumption. The man who desires wealth must assume wealth in consciousness, see himself enjoying it, feeling it, using it, sharing it. He must not be content to hope or plan. He must be the living embodiment of the fulfilled desire. Only then will the outer world respond. Many fear that assuming wealth while in poverty is dishonest or delusional. They confuse assumption with lying or wishing. But the law is not moral, it is factual. The universe does not judge. It responds only to the state impressed within. To assume is not to deny reality, it is to establish the reality that the outer world has not yet reflected. A man may be poor in appearance, but if he dwells in the state of wealth, the universe is compelled to answer. The evidence of the senses is irrelevant, the unseen is the cause, and the seen is the effect. There is a subtlety in the law. The state must be complete, coherent, and sustained. A half-hearted assumption mingled with doubt or fear is ineffective. You must immerse yourself fully in the scene. Feel it as real. Let your senses inhabit it. Hear the voices, see the sights, touch the objects, feel the satisfaction and joy. Allow no intrusion of disbelief. If the state is rich, you must live it inwardly in every detail. This is the alchemy of the inner life. The outer will follow in exact proportion. Consider another example. A man desired a promotion, yet all evidence suggested stagnation. He applied, he waited, he feared rejection. Each night, he imagined the scene of success, signing documents, receiving congratulations, feeling the inner satisfaction of accomplishment. He did not waver, he entered the state fully, allowing no doubt to creep in. Weeks later, the promotion arrived, exactly as he had imagined. His inner state had preceded the fact, and the fact could not resist the pressure of consciousness. The state must be maintained continuously. It is not enough to imagine once or twice and hope for results. Like a flame, it must be fed, nurtured, and sustained. Each thought, each feeling, each action must be consistent with the assumption. The outer world is patient. It waits for the inner reality to be fully impressed before responding. Consistency in the inner life is the secret of all manifestation. Wealth in this sense is not acquired, it is realized. It is the natural expression of a consciousness that dwells in the state of having. You do not work to earn it, you awaken to it. You do not chase it, you embody it. Every act, every word, every thought becomes a reflection of the state you occupy. The outer world then appears to reward you, yet it is merely the mirror of your inner reality. Even apparent obstacles are of use. They reveal the areas where the state has not yet been fully assumed. If a man encounters debt, delay, or denial, it is not a judgment, but an indication of where consciousness must be corrected. Persist in the inner state, imagine the resolution, feel the freedom, and the outer will yield. It cannot resist the inner pressure. The world is obedient to consciousness, it is never rebellious. Many have experienced the wonder of this principle without recognizing it. A child imagines a toy, a game, or a friend, and often it appears through circumstance as if by magic. The same principle governs adult life, yet adults doubt and rationalize, thinking the outer must dictate. It does not. The outer is always the effect, the mirror, the consequence of the inner state. To be wealthy, to be prosperous, to succeed, you must first embody these states within. Only then will the outer world confirm them. Even small assumptions, repeated faithfully, grow into great outer realities. A man may begin by assuming small acts of provision, then larger ones, until the entire field of his desire is occupied. The unseen responds with perfect fidelity, and the outer world conforms in exact proportion. Patience, persistence, and precision in assumption are the tools by which all creation flows from the invisible to the visible. The scriptures affirm this endlessly. Believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. To believe is to assume. To receive is to see the effect in the outer world. The instruction is precise, unerring, and eternal. Wealth, freedom, success, happiness, all are brought forth first in the state of consciousness, and the outer world can only obey. A man who understands this principle becomes master of his life. He does not plead with circumstance. He does not fret over lack. He does not labor blindly. He imagines, assumes, and dwells in the fulfilled state. The outer world, powerless to resist, conforms. He becomes a living proof of the law. The state precedes the fact, and the unseen governs all that appears. The state must be complete, saturated with feeling, rich in detail, consistent, and sustained. It must occupy the mind in sleep and wakefulness alike. The inner life is the theater in which all desires are first performed. The outer world is but the audience responding to the drama played within. To occupy the state fully is to write the script for reality itself. Even when circumstances appear contrary, the inner state cannot be contradicted. A man may find bills unpaid, debts accumulating, opportunities delayed, yet if he persists in the inner state of wealth, the outer will inevitably conform. The world is obedient. It cannot resist the power of consciousness, impressed with certainty and feeling. The man who masters this principle ceases to be a victim of circumstance. He does not chase wealth, he dwells in it. He does not hope, he knows. He does not labor blindly, he imagines, assumes, and sustains. The state is everything. The outer world is nothing but a faithful mirror, reflecting precisely the inner reality he occupies. Even challenges, when approached correctly, serve the inner assumption. If obstacles arise, imagine yourself overcoming them effortlessly. Feel the satisfaction of resolution, the freedom of release, the joy of achievement. Persist, and the outer world yields. The state cannot be resisted. The fact follows the inner assumption with unerring certainty. Consider a man who desired to buy a home. All outward evidence suggested impossibility. Yet he imagined the keys in his hand, the smell of the rooms, the comfort of the space. He felt the joy of living there, the satisfaction of ownership, and the security it brought. Weeks later, the home was acquired through means he had not known existed. The outer world conformed to the inner assumption. The state had preceded the fact. This is the law that governs all reality. To master wealth, you must first master your inner state. Occupy the state of the rich person. Feel it, live it, rejoice in it. Let the outer world mirror what you have already assumed inwardly. Persist, saturate your consciousness with the state, and the outer world cannot resist. Wealth is not a distant prize. It is the natural expression of the consciousness that dwells in abundance. To understand the power of the act of faith is to step beyond the realm of the visible. to go beyond the evidence of your senses and to dwell unshakably in the reality of your desire fulfilled. Faith is not a passive hope or idle prayer. Faith is the living, conscious acceptance of the unseen as present, the unreserved assumption that what you wish for is already yours. This act of faith is the secret by which men move mountains and receive riches, for it does not rely on circumstance, it relies solely on the state you occupy. You may see delay, lack, or opposition in the outer world, yet if your inner assumption is steady and firm, the outer must bow to it. Consider the parable of the mustard seed. It is said that if a man has faith as small as a mustard seed, he can move mountains. The mountain is the outer circumstance, unyielding, imposing, seemingly insurmountable. The seed is the assumption, the inner faith, planted in consciousness. Though the seed may be invisible and tiny, it contains within it the full-grown tree, the life, the abundance, the reality. In the same way, your unwavering assumption contains the full manifestation of your desire. The outer world, no matter how contrary, cannot resist the law of consciousness, impressed with certainty and feeling. Let me recount the story of a merchant who sought to expand his business. Opportunities seemed closed, loans were denied, and partnerships fell through. To the world, success appeared impossible. Yet each night he retired to his chamber and entered a state of quiet assurance. He imagined deals completed, transactions smooth, wealth flowing freely. He did not fret over the obstacles, he did not reason with the delays, he did not argue with the outer evidence. He simply assumed with unshakable faith that the reality he desired already existed. In time, the outer world began to yield. Contracts were signed unexpectedly, investors appeared without solicitation, and his business flourished beyond prior imagination. The act of faith, persistent and unwavering, had impressed the unseen, and the seen conformed. Faith requires persistence, for the outer world will present distractions, contrary evidence, and seemingly insurmountable problems. To maintain the act of faith, one must look inward, not outward. One must repeat to oneself the inner truth: it is done. I am already in possession. The outer is only a reflection of my inner state. When doubt arises, as it inevitably will, return to the inner state. Immerse yourself once again in the scene of fulfillment and feel the reality of your desire as present. Doubt is the only obstacle to the operation of the law, for the law never fails, but it never operates contrary to the state you occupy. There is a young man who longed to pay off a crushing debt. Each month the bills arrived, each day the bank balance seemed lower, each call from creditors reminded him of lack. Yet at night, he would close his eyes and imagine the debt fully paid. He would hear the letters confirming satisfaction, feel the relief and freedom, rejoice in the security of financial release. He did not argue with the reality of his present condition. He assumed the fact as already fulfilled. Weeks later, unexpected income arrived, debts were settled, and he felt the freedom he had imagined. The act of faith, the conscious assumption of the end, had impressed the unseen, and the outer world reflected the state he had sustained. Faith is creative. It is the instrument by which all desires are brought into form. Yet it must be practiced with consciousness and intent. To act in faith is not to wish, hope, or pray vaguely. It is to feel, to know, to dwell fully in the reality of the desire fulfilled. The imagination must be vivid, the feeling real, the assumption unwavering. As the scriptures say, "Believe that ye have received them, and ye shall have them." The moment you believe, in the inward sense, the universe responds. Many confuse patience with waiting or hope with faith. Patience without faith is merely endurance. Hope without the inward assumption is wishful thinking. True faith is active. It is the living experience of the desired state. It does not look to the outer world for confirmation. The outer is always secondary, a mirror that reflects what has already been impressed inwardly. When you act in faith, you move in the world as one already in possession. Your thoughts, your words, your demeanor, all are consistent with the state of fulfillment. The outer cannot resist this inward pressure, and it bends accordingly. Let me give you an example of a woman who desired financial independence. She had no immediate means to achieve it, and was surrounded by those who doubted her ability. She could have been discouraged, yet she acted in faith. Each evening she closed her eyes and imagined the state of independence. She pictured herself managing her finances with ease, receiving opportunities, feeling the satisfaction of self-sufficiency. She did not argue with the lack surrounding her, nor did she plead with circumstance. She simply persisted in her inner state. Within weeks, opportunities she had never anticipated appeared, clients sought her services, and she experienced the financial freedom she had assumed inwardly. The outer world had no choice. It could only mirror the faith she had enacted within. Faith, when rightly understood, is never dependent on understanding the mechanics of manifestation. You need not know the exact steps, the methods, or the timing. To act in faith is to trust the inner reality, the unseen law which never fails. The outer world may seem chaotic, but the unseen operates with absolute precision. Your duty is to remain steadfast in the inner state, to act as though the end has already come, to feel it and to sustain it. The outer world then becomes the instrument through which your inner reality is expressed. Even the smallest act of faith has power. Consider a man who desired a promotion. His superiors had yet to acknowledge his ability, yet he assumed the position in imagination. He felt the satisfaction of the promotion. He acted with the authority and confidence of the new role. He carried himself as one already honored. The outer world, unable to resist the magnetism of his inner state, eventually confirmed it. The promotion came not because of argument, pleading, or effort alone, but because the act of faith had impressed the unseen. Faith requires consistency. It is not a single moment of imagination or hope. It is the repeated, unbroken occupation of the fulfilled state. Each day, each hour, each thought must be aligned with the assumption. If doubts arise, they must be corrected, not indulged. If fear creeps in, it must be replaced by feeling. The act of faith is not sporadic, it is continuous, alive, and sustained. This is the key to manifestation. The outer world cannot contradict the inner reality when the inner reality is unshakable. There is a young entrepreneur who dreamed of expanding his small workshop into a flourishing enterprise. He faced skepticism, lack of capital, and fierce competition. Yet each night, he entered the scene of success. He imagined orders fulfilled, satisfied customers, the joy of giving and receiving, the freedom of financial security. He acted each day as though the expansion were already accomplished, making decisions consistent with the assumed state. The outer world conformed. Investors appeared, contracts were signed, and the business flourished. This was the result of the act of faith, persistent and unwavering, transforming the unseen into visible reality. Faith is not a tool to manipulate, nor is it a method to coerce. It is the natural expression of your consciousness operating in alignment with the law. To act in faith is to enter the state of having, to live from the end, to persist in the inward reality. It is not concerned with timing, method, or the appearance of obstacles. The outer world is secondary, a mirror, a reflection of what is already true inwardly. The act of faith impresses the unseen and calls forth the outer. Even in matters of giving, faith operates. A man who imagines himself giving generously, who feels the joy and satisfaction of contribution, attracts to himself the means to give. The outer provision appears to support the inner assumption. The act of faith is creative, constructive, and generative in every domain. Wealth, relationships, opportunities all respond to the inward conviction of their reality. Consider the story of a young woman who longed to assist her community. She had no wealth, no influence, and no apparent means. Yet each evening she imagined the impact she could make. She felt the gratitude, the joy, and the satisfaction of helping others. Within months, unexpected opportunities arose, donations, partnerships, and support appeared. The outer world had been impressed by her persistent assumption. The act of faith had created the outer reality. Faith is never separate from feeling. The intellect alone is powerless. Thought without feeling cannot command the unseen. To act in faith, you must feel the reality as present. Hear it, see it, touch it inwardly. Allow every sense to inhabit the state. The more vividly and sensibly you feel it, the more certain is the manifestation. The outer world always conforms to the inner state, never the reverse. Even in adversity, the act of faith prevails. When circumstances seem contrary, when obstacles appear insurmountable, continue to inhabit the state of fulfillment. The outer world is powerless against the certainty of consciousness. Persist, imagine, feel, and rejoice inwardly. The unseen will respond, and the outer will follow, as faithfully and precisely as the reflection follows the original. There is a man burdened by debt and delay. He sees every day the evidence of lack, yet he persists in faith. Each night he imagines the debt erased, the bills paid, the freedom of abundance. He does not argue with the present. He does not analyze the method. He does not plead with circumstance. He simply occupies the inner reality. In time, the outer world yields, unexpected resources appear, debts are cleared, and freedom is realized. The act of faith has impressed the unseen and called forth the outer. Faith is living. It is action without outer evidence. It is the conscious, persistent occupation of the fulfilled state. It is not passive. It is not hesitant. It is the power by which men move mountains, receive riches, and manifest every desire. The outer world is the reflection, the inner state is the cause. Even the smallest, most seemingly insignificant act of faith contains creative power. A child believes in the unseen presence of a friend, and the world seems to respond. The same principle governs adult life. Faith, applied persistently and consciously, brings forth the reality of wealth, freedom, and fulfillment. The outer evidence may lag, but the law is precise. The state impressed inwardly is never denied outwardly. The act of faith is therefore the cornerstone of all manifestation. To live in faith is to live in the reality of your desire. It is to act, think, and feel as one who already possesses. It is to impress the unseen with certainty, joy, and consistency. The outer world cannot resist this inner pressure, and in due time, it will yield. Persist, imagine, assume, and rejoice inwardly, for the act of faith is the engine that moves the unseen into form, the invisible into visible, and the desire into reality. There is a moment, each night, when the world grows quiet, when the senses soften, and the mind is free to roam the invisible realms where all creation is born. It is in this sacred interval, just before sleep claims consciousness, that the mystical act of inner creation is most powerful. To dwell in the inner state, to impress upon your own awareness the reality of your desire fulfilled, is to participate in the divine process by which the world itself is shaped. You may think that your waking hours, your labor, your planning, your reasoning are the tools of manifestation, but they are mere shadows of the true activity, which takes place inwardly in the realm where spirit meets imagination, where faith becomes form, and where thought is the seed of reality. Consider the words of the scriptures, "Be still and know that I am God." In this stillness, the world of sense falls away, and you enter into communion with your own I am, the inner consciousness that is the source of all life, all power, all provision. To close your eyes and see yourself in the scene of fulfillment, to feel the reality of your wish already accomplished, is to act in concert with the unseen law that governs all things. It is to give to the formless, to impress the unseen, and to call forth the outer manifestation. There is a story of a young man struggling with poverty who could find no way to lift himself from want. Each day he labored, each night he fretted, and yet no change appeared. Then he was taught to dwell in the feeling of abundance before sleep. He would imagine opening letters, confirming unexpected money, hearing the words of gratitude for his services, and feeling the weight and joy of coins and notes in his hand. Each night before surrendering to slumber, he inhabited this reality fully. The outer world could not resist. Soon, windfalls came, debts were cancelled, opportunities arose that had seemed impossible. The outer world was the faithful reflection of the inner state, impressed with consistency and feeling. The mystical closing is not merely an exercise of imagination, it is a conscious act of alignment with the eternal. To take the last moments of the day and impress upon your own consciousness the reality of your fulfilled desire is to cooperate with the divine. It is to assert, without question, that the unseen is powerful, that your own I am governs your experience, and that the outer world is compelled to conform. Each night you impress the unseen with the certainty of your desire, you sow the seeds of inevitable manifestation. The harvest cannot fail to appear. Many resist this practice because it seems too simple. They search for methods, formulas, or systems, believing that complexity is necessary. Yet the law is plain. What you impress upon your consciousness in the state of sleep, or just before sleep, is the most potent creative force you possess. Consider the analogy of planting seeds in fertile soil. The more care you give to selecting, planting, and nurturing the seed, the more abundant the harvest. Likewise, the scenes you inhabit, the feeling you embrace, and the certainty you impress upon your own mind determine the fullness of the manifestation that will emerge. There is a tale of a woman who sought to manifest financial freedom. Each evening, she lay quietly and imagined herself in possession of money, imagining it flowing freely, feeling the joy and ease it brought. She heard imaginary voices of congratulation, sensed the satisfaction of living without want, and rejoiced inwardly in the reality of abundance. For weeks, she persisted in this nightly communion. Slowly, quietly, events aligned. Small gifts, opportunities for employment, unexpected clients, and fortunate circumstances arose. The outer world reflected the state she had assumed inwardly. Each night's exercise was not wasted, for the unseen responds with perfect fidelity to the impressed state. The mystical closing requires imagination, feeling, and persistence. You must create the scene with sensory detail, inhabiting it fully and sustaining it until sleep overtakes you. The mind cannot help but carry this impressed state into the deeper levels of consciousness, where it will act as the seed from which reality springs. Even when the outer world appears contrary, the inner reality is sovereign. Night after night, as you repeat this practice, you consolidate the power of your inner assumption. The outer will follow in exact correspondence. Consider the scripture that declares, "Whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven." The mystical closing is the act of binding. It is the conscious assertion of the reality of your desire, the sealing of the inner assumption in your own consciousness. In these quiet moments before sleep, you are co-creating with the eternal. You are impressing the unseen, commanding the law, and directing the forces that govern manifestation. The outer world, powerless to resist, will conform. A young man once desired to buy a home, yet all evidence suggested impossibility. He practiced the mystical closing each night. He imagined the keys in his hand, the smell of the rooms, the joy of possession, and the sense of security it brought. He did not waver. He did not reason with the seeming lack. He did not argue with circumstance. Each night, the scene grew more vivid, the feeling more real. Eventually, through unseen channels, the opportunity arose, and he acquired the home. The outer world had been compelled to mirror the inner state, impressed and reinforced through nightly communion with the desired reality. The mystical closing is also an act of faith. It is not concerned with method, reason, or evidence. It does not plead with the outer world, nor does it labor in doubt. It is the quiet, persistent, and vivid assertion of the reality you desire. Your senses, your feeling, your imagination, all participate. You hear, see, and feel the manifestation as real, and in doing so, you impress the unseen with the certainty of fulfillment. The world cannot resist the law. There is an alchemy in this practice. When you close your eyes, abandon the outer, and enter the scene of fulfillment, the unseen is moved. Your consciousness acts as the transmuting agent. The wish, the desire, the intention becomes the seed planted in the fertile soil of your own mind. From this seed, all circumstances will grow. The outer world is compelled to obey the inner state, and the outer evidence aligns in perfect proportion. Nightly practice consolidates this alignment, reinforcing the certainty of the unseen with each repetition. Consider a story of a young woman seeking a successful enterprise. She had no clients, no capital, no apparent means, yet she embraced the mystical closing each night. She imagined a thriving business, the joy of satisfied customers, the ease of provision, and the fulfillment of her ambition. Weeks passed, and doors opened she had never anticipated. Clients arrived, loans were approved, and her business prospered. The outer world was the faithful mirror of the inner state she had assumed consistently before sleep. Each evening's act of imagination impressed the unseen, and the outer world obeyed. The mystical closing also provides a profound psychological advantage. By rehearsing your desire as fulfilled, you cultivate confidence, courage, and clarity. You become immune to fear, worry, and doubt. The outer world may present obstacles, yet you have already inhabited the reality you seek. You do not react to circumstance with anxiety or desperation. You act from the state of fulfillment. The unseen responds, and your outward experience inevitably aligns. There is another example, a man burdened with debt and uncertainty, who could see no way forward. Each night, he practiced the mystical closing. He imagined the letters confirming payment, the relief of freedom, the joy of abundance. He felt the weight of coins and notes in his hand, the satisfaction of living without want. In time, resources appeared, debts were cleared, and he experienced the reality he had assumed. The outer world had no choice. It was compelled by the inner act of imagination and the sustained feeling of fulfillment. The practice is simple but precise. You must find a quiet moment, free from distraction. Close your eyes, silence the senses, and enter the scene of fulfillment. Feel it with every sense, hear the voices, see the surroundings, touch and taste the reality as if it exists now. Persist until sleep overtakes you. Night after night, the impression deepens, embedding the state of fulfillment into the very core of consciousness. The unseen is stirred, and the outer world bends in response. Consider the words, "Ask, and it shall be given you, seek, and ye shall find, knock, and it shall be opened unto you." In the mystical closing, the asking is the vivid imagining, the seeking is the sustained feeling, and the knocking is the persistence of nightly assumption. The outer world will respond, but only after the inner state has been fully impressed. The law is immutable. The unseen is obedient. The outer world is powerless to resist the inner conviction. Even in matters of giving, the mystical closing operates. A man who imagines himself giving generously, feeling the joy and satisfaction of contribution, attracts to himself the means to give. The outer world appears to supply what is necessary, not by coincidence, but as a reflection of the inner state. Faith and imagination, practiced in the quiet moments before sleep, create circumstances consistent with the assumed reality. A young man desired a flourishing career. He had no immediate means, no connections, no recognition. Each night he entered the scene of success, imagining himself performing his duties with skill, recognition, and ease. He felt the joy of accomplishment, the satisfaction of mastery, the pride of contribution. Weeks later, opportunities arrived, doors opened, and success became his experience. The outer world was compelled to obey the inner state impressed through nightly practice. The mystical closing is therefore a sacred act. It is a communion with the creative principle, a rehearsal of the desired reality, and a binding of the unseen to the end you seek. To neglect it is to leave creation to chance, to doubt, or to outer circumstances. To embrace it fully is to align yourself with the eternal law, to impress the unseen with certainty and feeling, and to bring forth the outer world in accordance with your desires. Even when circumstances seem resistant, the practice cannot fail. The outer may appear contrary, yet the inner state is sovereign. Persist, repeat, imagine, and feel. The law is not partial, it is absolute. The unseen is responsive, and the outer world bends inevitably to the impressed consciousness. The mystical closing is the instrument by which dreams, desires, and ambitions are brought into form through faith, imagination, and sustained inner conviction. The night is your ally. The quiet, the stillness, the soft surrender of the senses all conspire to make the act of imagination most potent. To close the day by dwelling in the fulfilled state is to plant the seed of reality in the fertile soil of your consciousness. Each night, each repetition, each feeling deepens the impression, and the outer world is compelled to conform. The mystical closing is the sacred, deliberate, and unerring method by which the invisible becomes visible, the unseen becomes seen, and the desire, long imagined and deeply felt, manifests as reality. Tonight, as you have journeyed inward with me, you have been shown the hidden workings of the unseen, the eternal law by which all desires are first conceived in consciousness and then reflected in the outer world. You have learned that wealth, freedom, and abundance are not distant prizes to be chased, but realities to be assumed, inhabited, and felt as present. The outer world is but a mirror, obedient to the states you occupy within. You have seen that the scriptures do not speak in metaphor alone, but in precise instruction. The kingdom is within you. The I Am governs all, and whatsoever you impress upon your consciousness with certainty and feeling must inevitably manifest. You have learned to dwell in the end, to act in faith, to persist in assumption, and to close each day in the vivid rehearsal of your fulfilled desire. These are not suggestions, they are the mechanics of creation itself. Let the inner vision be your guide. Let the feeling of possession saturate every thought, every action, every moment. When doubt arises, return to the scene you have imagined, inhabit it fully, and rejoice in it as real. Persist without wavering, for the outer world is powerless against the certainty of consciousness impressed with the state of fulfillment. Know that every night, in quiet meditation and vivid imagining, you are planting seeds in the fertile soil of the unseen. These seeds grow into form, circumstances bend to the law, and reality aligns with the inner assumption. There is no obstacle that can withstand the sustained feeling of the wish fulfilled, no delay that can resist persistent faith, and no limitation that can contradict a consciousness fully occupied with abundance. Go forth, therefore, and live in the state of your desire. Rehearse it, feel it, embody it, and let the unseen bring it forth. Wealth, success, joy, and freedom are not to be asked for in hope. They are to be assumed, possessed inwardly, and allowed to flow outward effortlessly. The world will answer as it must, for the law is immutable, and the kingdom is within you. Tonight, as you rest, feel the possession of all you desire. It is yours now. The gold is yours, the silver is yours, the abundance is yours, for the I Am within is the owner of all, and nothing can resist the state you have assumed.